Now joining me, really pleased to say, somebody who I've known for a little bit of time now. It's been a bit of an inspiration to me when I first met him, to be honest with you. Is none other than a home manager himself in the care sector, Mark Tops. How you doing, Mark?
Yes, not too bad, thank you very much.
Yeah, I know off air we just said about the weather, the typical British scenario here. We get all weathers in one day in this country. You would not know what it was like about an hour ago. But there you go. Mark, really pleased to have you on, buddy, because I've been meaning to get you on for some time now. I do a kind of a side podcast which is really focused on health and social care as a whole, and I have a variety of different people on sharing their experiences and just basically giving a little bit of education and just a little bit more awareness, I suppose, about it all. But I'll kind of, just before we get to some main points, Mark, like how you and I first met. Obviously, we both belonged to a program, My Home Life. And at the time, you was on a cohort that I think was a little bit further along the road. I don't know how long that was, but
I think it was too long, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, you was invited to come in by our amazing teacher, Michelle, who I can't say enough good things about. And she's very modest as well, but she's an amazing influence on me as well. But you were brought in to share some of your kind of experience with the program and some of the stuff that you used. And through that, I was sitting there listening to you, and it's odd because it's not often I get too inspired by anybody. I'll be totally honest with you. Once you've heard it once, you've heard it a million times. And I'm not easily won over. But your sort of story about your background, where you come from, really resonated with me as a person and as a carer at the same time. And just your ethos, your ethics kind of like fell into the same place for me. And everything you were saying about your journey, it just really, really hit home with me, to the point where I literally walked away from that day feeling like, I remember sitting down, I think I was in a bar or something, and I was like, man, I need to change. I need to think about, where I need to go now. It was one of those things that just literally like a light bulb went off. And I don't know if it was certain key parts that I picked up on that you said, but you could tell you was a very passionate person for what you do, and I love that in people, from any sort of range, really. So, yeah, there you go. I'm putting you over as much as I can here, Mark. No doubt about it. But it's true. It's absolutely true. And I'm not like that with everybody. People that know me well will know that I'm very particular. But I think that you definitely resonated with me in that sense. Now, obviously, Mark, just give us a little bit of a brief background, like some of the your experiences, your early experiences within care, like how you got into it, what made you want to get into it.
Yeah, so I started when I was 17, and I volunteered in a learning disability care home. Wasn't something I ever thought of as a career, to be honest, until I walked through that door of that care home. I'd never really have even explored social care. I think the people I was supporting were like the same age as me. They were like 18, 19. And it was just going to the park, going bowling, swimming, cinema, things that at that age I would have been doing anyway with my friends. And I didn't see it as a job. And I stayed there for a year till I was 18. And then I applied for a full-time job and was lucky enough to have accepted and got it. But I think probably about 6 months later down the line, I saw a lot of abuse. Which it did impact me. I knew it was wrong, but it was hard because, those carers that you're working alongside, I've worked alongside them for 18 months, they become your friends. Mm-hmm. But I've always stood up, I've always wanted to do the right thing, and I did whistleblow. And it ended up in court. Some of the carers were arrested, put into prison. And I think from that moment, I remember coming out of that courtroom and thinking, I want to go further in social care. I want to make a difference. I deferred from uni during that time, and I decided just to cancel my application to uni. And then I just kind of worked my way up within social care. Everywhere I've gone, whatever role it is, whether it's learning disabilities, elderly care, I've always spoken out. And I think I remember back to when I was obviously 18 years old and that abuse, and none of those residents there that were being abused could have spoken out. It's a bit like now, obviously, I'll use any opportunity I can to speak to anybody I can, news reporters, journalists, just to, to do the right thing. But yeah, going back, I've worked in a range of different care settings now, obviously just to broaden my experience. And yeah, I mean, it's horrific what you see out there. There's abuse every day, which, it's very sad. I mean, elderly care, you've got it from a lot from the relatives and financial abuse. And I think in learning disabilities, there's a lot of kind of over medicating and a lot of over restraint, which I don't know, in 2020, I don't think it should be a big thing anymore, but sadly it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And your points that you mentioned about the whole whistleblowing is something that I also had experience in. I guess that was part of my kind of connection with you when you were talking about when you came in and told us about some of your experiences in that presentation that day. Really hit home with me. But I don't know, you never know who's listening, but there may be people in a similar situation. And, like you say, when you are practically the only person that is willing to speak out for somebody on somebody's behalf, and you may be a person as well that's just like started, or you may be at the lower levels as it in the tier system, it is a frightening thing because you have a lot of influential people that have been there for a long time, managers, all the rest of it. And if something's kind of not right culturally, it's even harder because they don't even know they're doing it half the time, and it's just a disaster. But Mark, I mean, like if yours was like mine, when you first do that, you hope that there's going to be a level of protection for the whistleblower. Obviously, you hope that the policies the company has is good and it's solid, and you're going to be protected. But for me, I've always found it, when I was working in care, I always found it difficult as a leader to kind of make sure that my staff, no grey areas pretty much, no matter what their friendship is like with each other, that if they see something happening or they don't think something's right, they need to come and speak out. They either need to do that by just going straight to CQC or coming to a supervisor, etc., but they need to be talking to somebody and speaking up for the person. But sometimes there was a lot of, I guess, mixed messages all the time about, well, we're a staff team, we stick up for each other, we help each other, we support each other. And the moment somebody goes off and maybe says something, that's kind of it. They never really got the fact that we are supporting vulnerable people with learning disabilities, with huge communication barriers most often. And it's our job, surely the fundamental purpose of us is to protect from abuse, much less the people that are hands-on supporting those people. Have you found that? I mean, I don't know if that's still around as much today, like in your part of where you are, but do you find that a difficult part when you're talking to your staff team? Do you have those conversations, and have you had like friction where there's been like they just don't get that understanding?
I think for me, I always go back with my staff, whichever staff team I'm working with at the time, about kind of my experiences. So when I was 18, I was very fortunate the company backed me. I think I had the evidence to obviously prove the abuse that was going on. Further down the line in that company, I had to whistleblow again against a manager, and that was somebody that I would have classed at the time as one of my best friends. I'd worked with them for 3-4 years. I'd come to my wedding, and for me, that was one of the hardest things I've had to do, is say, well, actually, I need to report abuse, but actually this is against somebody that, I'm really close to, I know everything about. I spent a lot of time with them, both inside and outside of work. And I did whistleblow because that's the right thing to do. And anybody sitting here watching or thinking, do I do it? Then yeah, 100% do it. The company didn't listen to me, and I did have to go outside, and I went to the CQC, and it ended up in a big investigation. Sadly, the company didn't back me, and my life was made, to be honest, hell, and I quit. I just walked away and I said, that's enough. I'm not tolerating it. I've done I followed your procedures. I followed what I think is right, and you're treating me this way. And yeah, I left with no other job to go to, and that was a really hard time for me. I left behind residents that I'd looked after for like 4 years. Just one day being there every day to suddenly no job, not surrounded by anybody. But I always use that experience with my staff team, and I say to them, regardless of what that concern is, then raise it. And I always say there's never going to be any comeback on you for raising a concern. And I always say to them, and I always use that example I've just given, that I've been there, I've been through that company that doesn't support you, where if you whistle blow, that you're going to be penalised, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen to you. I think that hard reality and that truth and that experience that I've gone through, I think the staff teams that I've always managed know that I will back them. And I think when they have whistle blown or they have raised concerns, we're very quick to act on them. And I think staff need that. But I also talk to them about, staff that have left, whether they speak to them anymore, those staff that they thought were friends that, further down the line, like a year down the line, they don't speak to. And I often use that as an example as well and say, you might be best friends with this person now, but, a year, 2 years down the line, if you both went separate ways into different companies, would you still speak? And a lot of the time, sadly, carers don't, and I don't know why, because you build such a close bond, but I don't know whether it's because there's so many different personalities working in the social care industry that, outside there might be people that you'd probably never have spoken to like outside. But I always say to people, you've got to do what you believe is true. And I also say that there are so many care companies out there that if you need to whistleblow and you think, actually, I do need to step away, or you're worried about the repercussions, then, then line up another job somewhere else and then whistleblow, because the world's the oyster, isn't it, as a care worker, I think, because there's hundreds and thousands of companies that you can choose. But I think ultimately my message to anybody thinking about raising concerns is, if that was your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, whoever it is, would you want somebody looking after them not to raise their concern? And I don't think there's anybody out there that wouldn't want somebody to raise concerns about their loved ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good way of putting it as well. It's something I certainly struggled with over the years. And I think, obviously, with me, I have a sister with a learning disability, with autism and epilepsy. And I suppose growing up with it, for a long time when I was working in care, because of my standards, I think I just expected everybody to do as I would do, like those little extra things, like tucking somebody into bed. Maybe it takes you 5 minutes after your shift, but you just do it because you want to do it. I got to the point where I was like, why is no one else like this with me? Maybe they just see it as a job, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It is a job at the end of the day, and maybe not everybody shares my values, my ethos, my ethics and stuff around that. And when I become, certainly the second time around, when I started leading people, I kind of had to critique myself and sort of realize that not everybody has the same mindset, and that is where, hopefully good coaching comes into play. And when you do see the good things, you kind of acknowledge it there and then, and you hope that practice will happen when I'm not around, and they'll just do it, off their own back, spontaneous, which is the big thing, really. Now I just want to hit up on a few points here, Mark, like around leadership, because I know that's something that you and I are a part of with this My Home Life program. And I know you. I think I did. I used your. I kind of stole the document that you had, that you'd done, and it was kind of a reflection. And I know you used it for the CQC inspectors and all that kind of thing. I think I would say in my last year of care, with CQC, on a side note, I had this big kind of realization with CQC that I know that a lot of care homes, they go for the outstanding, or they want the outstanding. It's their big kind of main thing. But I'd seen, let's say, a couple of homes that I knew really well get outstanding, and I was like, really? How? Like it just didn't seem possible. Is it the luck of the draw of who you get? Is the way it's conducted outdated? To touch on that before I go into leadership, because I've just literally gone into a side bit here,